Hello, leader. Welcome back to the Fierce Factor podcast. This week, we are back for part 2 of my very insightful, very real conversation with board certified nurse practitioner and founder of the Injectability Institute Injector Training Academy, Leslie Fletcher. Hey, if you didn't get a chance to catch last week's discussion, you'll definitely want to head back and catch up on our conversation about the legitimacy of training programs for new injectors. We talked about red flags to look out for. Leslie shared an expert list of questions to ask when selecting training for yourself or your team members. And we had some dialogue about the impact of the projected demand for injector training and proficiency and how that will really have an impact on the health of medical aesthetic businesses in years to come. And we continue this conversation this week by talking about the key components of development that qualify a great injector, a discussion around commissions for injectors, and the nuances that keep a practitioner loyal to you as a business owner, and whether or not training is a smart business strategy when it comes to the dollars and cents. I'm telling you, this conversation gets spicy and I like it. And finally, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic. Please take a screenshot of this episode, tag me, and share your opinions around the subject. This is a conversation our industry truly needs to be having in whole, and it's going to take every single one of us doing our part to spread the word and share the love. Okay, goddess, without further ado, please enjoy the second half of Taming the Wild West of Aesthetic Injector Institutes with Leslie Fletcher. Hi there, welcome to the Fierce Factor podcast. I'm your host, Kaylee Lindholm. And I think it's time for us women to shift the conversation in business and step into our feminine leadership to do the most iconic work the aesthetic industry has ever seen. Each week, I'll be bringing a powerful dose of strategy, sarcasm, solutions, and sass that will rev up your creativity and ignite your brilliance as you link arms with me along our shared path of personal and professional growth in 20 minutes or less. Let's go. It's so funny because we talk about this a lot with entrepreneurs, right? Like just imposter syndrome in a sense. And I had a conversation recently with a client who said, well, I went through residency with like these doctors that are like in my area or whatever. And I've just continued to, the way she sort of describes it is advanced. And she's done a lot more of her own clinical research and her own thinking. And so she has her own methodologies and her own programs and protocols and things where like a lot of her colleagues look at her like, why are you so out of the box? And I wonder if that comes from just the medicine side of aesthetics, where let's say I went to get a nursing degree as an example, like here's module 1, here's module 2, right? There's obviously the hands-on and all of that too, but like someone is telling you that you now have that, check that box, you have that degree, you have that certification, you have that competency. It's just so nuanced because it's so new and growing, but it really does take, I think, like leaning in and trying things and doing it right to like get that full experience.
Absolutely. I mean, education is an interesting thing, curriculum, comprehensive curriculum. What should the best educational facility or our company operate or offer? I think it starts with that medicine. I mean, yes, it is an art, but if you don't have the evidence base to back it up, it's just you flippantly saying, oh, I tried this one time and it worked. But you've got to kind of have that research behind it. And that's the time that it takes those educators to really do that research. And to me, that is what kind of separates the good educators from the mediocre. But also training curriculum that is comprehensive should have new material because this field is dynamic and it is essentially less than 20 years old. I mean, about 20, 21, when you think of just Botox, but fillers in itself really didn't take off until Voluma was approved in 2013 and we started doing the whole face. So we're looking at 10 years or so. And so if we're not bringing anything new to the table, which is another issue sometimes with stagnant training companies that have been around for a while, which is something I told you in the beginning to look for, but if they're not constantly changing and constantly evolving and updating that curriculum, I mean, every time I go to the printer, probably twice a week, and my husband's like, can you just like order 50 of these and not send me to the printer? I'm like, no, because I just found this thing out. I got to add it. Like, they need to know, like I'm just compulsively adding new material because I feel like if I don't tell my trainees, then I'm leaving out something really important. And so it should constantly be evolving and having those new concepts and new techniques. And then you should also be able to follow up with that trainer, and you should be able to reach out to them and say, hey, I tried this. I have a question, or I've got a patient coming in and I know this is a new technique for me. Here's what I'm thinking. What do you? And so that relationship, I think that's another thing to look for when you're looking at training companies, is how accessible are those people afterwards? Is it just kind of this company that you never hear from again, that you're getting your certificate from? And remember, there's no like certification for this. You're getting a certificate, but it's not a certification.
Leslie, I have a question from your experience. I think something that's unique about you too is that I know we're talking about, and as I look, we're on video together and I can see you in your beautiful clinic, but you're on the road doing a lot of training, both under the umbrella of injectability, but also you're an AMI trainer. I think you train the AMI trainers too. Like, I think I actually don't know the answer to that, but I believe. So from your experience, I think too, like you get to take in so many different perspectives and bring them back. And I think that's probably why you're like, oh, when I was teaching this with this patient, or, you're sort of learning as you're teaching. I'm just curious, because as we're talking about this now, this influx in need for new injectors and the proficiency. So I'm seeing this sort of like balance beam, right? Mm-hmm. I'm curious from your perspective of training trainers all over the place, or training injectors, is there a value for an injector to not just start out on her own, but to really start under the wing of somebody, potentially, even if they felt entrepreneurial? I think 90% of injectors think they want to start their own company, from my perspective. They don't know what it takes.
Well, I think you're a little skewed though, because they'll reach out to you when they're at that point. So your perception might be a little bit skewed, because I talk to a lot of people on my end who are like, I would never want to run my own practice. I see all the days in, days out. But by the time they reach you, they're already in that mode and they need you as a coach. So that makes sense coming from you. But on my perspective, I don't think that is entirely true as far as the percentages. But what I do agree with 100% is that it is almost crucial to work with someone else before opening up your own business. Mm-hmm. I had the wonderful privilege of working for a plastic surgeon for 7 years. Before I left, I actually worked for a dermatologist simultaneously. So I got to see kind of the derm side of things, which is very different. And each one of those brought great things. Like plastics is really good with their before and after imaging. Derm is not. Derm is very good with using medical assistants. Plastics are not. So like I was able to kind of pull some really great things from both of those. And both offices were wonderful and giving me autonomy, but also being there if I needed questions. And then in between, I worked at a medical spa too, and got to see kind of the small business run. And so, 100% that, and going into everyone else's office and seeing how things are done right and wrong, has brought together the entire package of opening up my own practice. And so you kind of need that frame of reference before you open up, to have the ideas of what you want to do to start your own brand and start your own business. So I think having that mentorship there with someone, otherwise you just kind of feel like you're injecting on an island and you never know, is this normal or is this not normal? Is there a better way to do this or not? And you might go to a class or two and see a couple other people, but until you have that person to bounce ideas off with, and that's what's so nice about our practice. There's 5 nurse practitioners and we're always collaborating. We're like, oh, I got to show you this before and after. What do you think of this? How do you feel this? This is the technique I use. And we always have like clinical review, and that's what makes you better, Yeah. So if you don't have that, it's going to be challenging, I think, to start off from the beginning.
Yeah, no, I know. I think back, that's why I picked like a group practice for my kids, for their pediatricians. Cause I'm like, I don't want someone just making their own, if like they're doubtful about something, I want them to go be able to talk to a colleague like down the way. So, okay, I'm going to just take this one layer deeper, and I'm just curious how you would handle this situation. So one of the main challenges or fears that I hear from our clients who are looking to then scale up their business and bring in other injectors is that I'm afraid if I train them and teach them, they're going to then leave me. So if it is in fact the case that it's almost crucial for someone to go and have mentorship and learn from someone else before they start, do we need to flip that narrative? Like, should it be more that this is the way the industry is going to happen? Like your injectors are going to come work for you for a few years and then they're going to go out on their own? Or is it you have to get that straight with that injector in the beginning when you bring them in? What's your thought about that?
Yeah, I hear that all the time too.
Mhm.
And as a business owner myself, it is a fear. But I think one thing that you missed is make your practice so incredible they would never want to leave.
Mm,
That's the bottom line. I mean, if
mm.
you treat them with such incredible respect and give them everything they need in a relationship and in a practice, including their salary and including resources and accommodations for things that they need, scheduling and childcare, whatever it is, if you love them, make them stay just by sheer love and the way you're treating them. I don't think you should, well, that's another point on commission and that kind of stuff. But I think if you just treat your patient or your providers well, the chances of them leaving are less. And then give them increase in roles too, because they also leave not just because they're being not treated well, but they want growth. So if they can't have growth, then they may leave and try and find someplace else. So if you see that like entrepreneurial spirit, or you see that they're kind of getting restless in their everyday, position, then give them something new to do. Give them like a challenge. Like, okay, I want you to head this IV bar. I want you to head this weight loss clinic that we're going to start doing, or some things that you see, or hey, I want you to start training for me now because, I'm getting so busy with trainings. And so you're getting great and let's move you here. And so just kind of working with what you see they're wanting to do, what they're comfortable doing. That to me is key. But at the end of the day, you can't go into an interview like that. Like, oh, I'm not going to hire you if you're going to leave and start your own place. If you see red flags to begin with, like before you interview them, and sometimes these Insta famous injectors aren't the best people to have to bring onto your practice, because that tells me sometimes that they're like already on this trajectory of being their own person or their own business. So if this is something that's really important to you, I would actually look at hiring people with less experience and less social media presence and groom them in the practice and just really bring them into the family and hope that this becomes something that they just won't ever leave. But the reality is more than likely one or two of them will, and that's okay. I just told you the statistics. We're doubling the market within 5 years. There's going to be more business for everybody. And if they are wanting to leave and start their own place and you're not allowing them, they're not going to be happy there anyway. So what good is that?
Yeah, I love that answer. I mean, that warms my heart. I like to think I lead my business that way, but I too I went through a long period of time where I really took it personally when it didn't work out,
I mean, who wouldn't? Like if you didn't take it personal, it would be a mention of your character. Like I definitely take it personal when people would want to leave. I would take it personal, but you have to look at the whole picture. So the whole picture is that family sometimes supersedes, or they're moving, or there's things that they need that you're not able to offer, or and that's okay. But yeah, of course, we hold them so close to our heart. That's the trouble of being such a close family, is like, oh gosh, what if this were to happen?
Yeah. It sounded like you had an opinion on commission that you wanted to share.
I don't use commission for any of our medical providers. I feel like it is against the law. It's actually against the law. And I don't think it's ethical. I don't ever want a provider to choose a treatment plan based on how much money they're going to make. I want them to make that decision based on what the patient needs. Do I compensate my injectors well? I do. We're in a very affluent field, if you will. We do make good income here, and they deserve to be paid well. They're very well educated and they are incredible providers, but I don't incentivize based on number of syringes or units. I just don't think that's fair to the patient.
Yeah, there was a trend, like for a while, I was noticing just in my small little cohort of clients where I was seeing like the practices that were, I would say, growing more sustainably, that were retaining people, were not commissioning, actually not commissioning their providers. And it was just something I noticed, that I think when you have people that are coming for, to your point, the entire work environment, the culture, place they can bring the baby on Fridays. I mean, right? Things like that, right? I talk a lot about, like, I think we underestimate really great people who want like A players, like they can go make money anywhere, right? And so they want a growth plan. They want to work for a great boss. They want to show up and feel fulfilled in the work they do. And so I think those are all important pieces. So I just wanted to kind of get your opinion about that.
I mean, imagine, and this is why it's against the law. If your cardiologist was incentivized by how many medications he gave you, That wouldn't be a fair treatment plan because he's getting paid more based on how many medications and do you really need those medications?
Yeah.
So if we really want to re-medicalize aesthetics, which is something I'm completely passionate about, I feel like people see it as hair and nails and they don't see it as medicine. But we want to pick and choose where we implement the re-medicalization, but this has got to be one of them because in real medicine, non-aesthetic, non-cash medicine, you would never incentivize a physician or a nurse practitioner by how many prescriptions they wrote or how many patients they saw in a day. Like it doesn't make sense. It's not ethical for the patients. And that's why there's a federal law against it because of that. So I feel like if we're going to follow some federal laws for medicine, we need to kind of follow them all.
Yeah.
But that's my personal opinion. And I do bonus. It's not like I don't bonus at the end of the year or do profit share. And we do profit sharing. So there's some ways around it, but we certainly do not do every paycheck based on what their sales were.
Yeah. Okay. Just one more off track question, and then I'll ask a final question, then we can wrap up and let you get back to work. Why can't our pharma companies, why can't Allergan just make sure that like every injector is competent and proficient? I'm just kind of playing that card there.
Well, I think they're trying. I know last year Allergan did 40,000 educational activities, and that's their second largest spend behind research and development in the entire company of AbbVie. And so they're doing their best, but that's just one company, number one. They spend more than any other company. I do know that as well, but they spend a ton. But still at that, even at their goals of how many injectors they're trying to train in the next 5 years, it's impossible. And also they're not an accreditation or certification company. It's a pharmaceutical company. So the fact that they do any at all is like incredible. And it's phenomenal that they would invest that kind of money in education. They don't have to. It's very unusual in traditional medicine, going back to that path, that, your diabetes medication pharma rep is going to have a class where you can teach people how to educate their patients on how to use this pod or whatever. Like it just doesn't happen. You kind of just have to learn on the job. But in aesthetics, it is something that they have taken a certain importance and put a certain dollar amount, which is large amount, but it's still impossible. And also they can only teach to on-label, which thankfully for Allergan is about 89% of the face, but they are limited by their FDA regulations to only train to on-label areas. And there are so many areas that we treat that are off-label. And so that is where the non-pharma educational companies come into play, like myself and others that are out there. And so we can kind of take up where the pharmaceutical companies have left off.
Yeah. Well, and the lived experience of treating patients and running a business. I mean, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, they try. They have a business development track. They've got your AMIs, which are hands-on in clinic, but there's just a limit to how many of those and how much money is spent and how much time is spent and how many injectors they have.
Yeah. Okay. So that brings me to my last question, because maybe if I'm listening to this and I'm like, well, I've been injecting for long enough, and I feel like it's sort of the next step now for aesthetic injector owners who are like, okay, I've got running a decent business. Like now I'm going to start a training academy. And sometimes when we do the math, it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense, so I guess I would, to get from your perspective, and you obviously have such a strong team and you have people to support you to build that. You have invested a lot into that side of the business, but do you think this is a good business model for every experienced injector to say, now I should start a training academy?
So the advantages to having a training company is credentialing for your patients. So prospective patients look at your website and they see that you're a trainer. That gives them confidence. So that's a great thing that I think encourages a lot of successful injectors out there to start their own training academy. But when you look at the revenue with both businesses, it's definitely more lucrative to stay in the practice injecting if you run a very successful practice. If you have time off during the week where you're not booked and you could be doing something else, then you have two businesses that you run. But not everybody is a good trainer. That's the other really big piece of this puzzle. Just because you're a good injector and you have a lot of experience doesn't mean you know how to work with different personality types and you know how to impart confidence to people. And that's the thing that people forget. Not only do you need to be a public speaker, which a lot of people aren't, because you need a lecture, you need to give some sort of didactic portion, but you need to deal with multiple different personalities and turn on a dime based on what that personality is bringing to you. And and figure out what each person needs to leave that training feeling like it was money well spent. And that's going to be different for every single person in your class. And you need to be on 24/7 because those questions come. Like, I don't even take breaks during these things. I can't check my phone. I go dark. I tell the office I'm dark. I'm training. Like, my focus is there. So it's a different type of personality that is an educator. And it's not even like an educator like a teacher would be. It's a mentor too. And yeah, I don't know that it's the best business model for everybody, but certainly for those who have some of those gifts, I mean, it's a wonderful blessing too, to be able to be on both sides of this coin and really experience both sides of the business.
I love that. Well, and I think that's the point right here. And what you and I are trying to put together and work on is a set of standards, a set of way to evaluate and know that, look, if I invest my money into learning, I'm going to get what I'm paying for. I know that there's going to be an ROI for me on this and not going to bump into some of these red flags. So yes, this is our call to action, I will say. So that is sort of my end of my questions for you, Leslie. Is there anything else you think we missed or that you would want to just sort of say as like a final word, around this topic or other?
Yeah, I actually was just kind of looking through my notes. I just want to make sure I mentioned, I don't know that I did, how important talking about in the didactic portion, anatomy and AE. So a lot of trainings won't go into that. It's kind of its own training in itself, but I think it's important to work that into the curriculum that you're delivering. So when you're teaching a Botox class, make sure that you cover like what could happen if you don't do this will happen. This could happen. And then how do you correct this? You need to do that. So there's like this little treatment pathway. And that also takes experience because you have to have lived through it, but also research and kind of, making sure that you have the tools at your disposal to talk through complications with your prospective trainees. And anatomy, of course, can't be overstated, but those are things to look for in your classes that you're looking for.
Awesome. Thank you for that. What an exciting time.
It is. It really, I just feel so blessed to be in this field because it's so exciting.
Yeah. And you're not worn out after all that travel, all the time.
I'm totally worn out. I am, but I sleep really well. And I have a really great supportive family and team that lifts me up and that does a lot of stuff for me that makes it all possible. But yeah, it is pretty exhausting for sure, but it's exhilarating. I'm just completely exhilarated every time I do an educational training.
Well, we love it. And we in our academy have several clients who are just huge fans of your work and are in constant conversation with you too, but you made a big impact. So thank you for that. I almost forgot. Someone asked me to ask you if you had any travel tips, like any kind of secret sauce, because I can't pack like one carry-on suitcase for the life of me, but like you always show up dressed to the nines, accessorized, like how any kind of, advice around how to like travel well.
Absolutely. I have gotten really good at this. You should have seen me in high school. I was the one that carried, way too many bags, but I had to get good because we mostly do carry on. I'd say like 99% of the time I'll do carry on, even for like 8 days. So here's my tip. It starts with the shoes. So whatever pair of shoes you're wearing on the plane, that's probably going to be your pair of shoes that you need to match every outfit with. You might be able to slip in one other extra set of flats in a carry-on, but it's the shoes and then probably one jacket or sweater that you wear on the plane. And I have to put medical supplies in there too. Like I have to travel with my medical supplies. So it's that plus my clothes. The accessories, I kind of stack them all together and put stuff inside. I put underwear and things inside of other things. I have one toiletry bag that I just keep packed all the time that has just the smallest little things of things. You should see this thing of hairspray. It's like that big. So really go for those small travel accessories and make them work for you. But really, if you can keep it to 1 or 2 pairs of shoes tops, you'll be fine. Yeah, and those tennis shoes take up a lot of room. So I'm not a big tennis shoe wearer, but if you do wear them, then make sure you wear them on the plane because then it won't take up your space in the suitcase. Oh, and I make a list. I actually have a list of what I'm wearing on each day to make sure I have the right accessories for it.
Oh my gosh. That is just too much. Yeah. I was already off with the shoes. Like I probably pack and I just don't know what I'm going to want to feel like wearing and that I should just not let myself go there.
You have to feel what you're wearing before you leave. you're going to have to go, well, on Thursday, I'm going to feel like wearing this because I've got to do that. And you've got to kind of plan it all out.
Yeah. It's like your meal prep or something. Okay. Well,
exactly.
we're requesting a video, an Instagram video of Leslie packing for a trip. So put that
okay. I actually have a great picture of my little nesting dolls. I have a really big tote for my carry-on. They say you have the carry-on plus one extra bag, which is supposed to be your purse. That's pretty big. And I have I'll send you the picture. Okay. I have the tote and then a smaller tote and then my purse inside of that. So I get like 3 bags inside my carry-on.
Genius.
So yes.
I love it.
Nesting dolls.
Nesting dolls. That's so great. Well, thank you so much, Leslie. And I think you were going to have a special offer as well for any injectors who were looking to come in and access your wisdom and that incredible experience at Injectability.
Yeah. So the promotion that we're running is that if you did want to take a live class from myself or one of my educationists around the country, that you could register. We have a Shopify. You can get on our Instagram, which is Injectability Beauty, or my own personal Instagram, Leslie Fletcher NP. And also on our website, there's links everywhere. And then you can kind of hover over each class that we're doing. It gives you a description and then you click on it to purchase. And then you can add the code 200 off for a live training.
That's very generous of you. Thank you
for watching the webinar.
Yay.
Thank you for hosting it.
Yeah, no, of course. So this is wonderful. So I will add all of that info into the show notes and on our end so that everybody has access to that. And thanks again, Leslie. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you. And I look forward to continuing this conversation and building some real support and tools and structure for injectors who are looking to get the right kind of training. And hopefully everybody pops in and sees you as well. So thanks so much.
Sounds good. Well, thank you for hosting.
Okay, take care.
Alrighty. Bye-bye.
Wait, before you go, if you're vibing with this conversation and want to join me on my mission to help 1,000 inspiring and intentional women cross the next $1 million milestone in their business this year, or maybe you want to become one of them, head over to Facebook and join our free community, the Fierce Factor Society. Over there, we are taking this conversation to an elevated level. Get access to resource guides, podcast supplements, and guideposts, direct communication with me and my expert team, and of course, a society of fierce women making big moves and disrupting the status quo in aesthetics and wellness. You can link directly through the show notes or head to Facebook and search up the Fierce Factor Society. See you there, goddess.